Hey, so this week we looked at Anselm and Aquinas. I'm going to start with Anselm, and he has what you call an ontological argument. This is basically saying that God is the best thing that we can imagine. I think this is in line with our thinking that God is the greatest form of a lot of things. Love, that God is everlasting, God is the greatest form of truth. Um, he believes that things can only exist in two ways, those ways being existing in our minds, but not in tangible physical reality, or existing in our minds as well as existing in the physical world. If God is the greatest thing we can think of, the things we can think of are better if they are real. So God must be real to be the greatest thing. This is kind of Anselm's argument, is in order for God to be the greatest thing, he has to be real, because whatever we can imagine ultimately is greater if it is real in the physical world. I think this leaves room for us to say that God is incomprehensible. This makes me think of Psalms 147, which says, "Great is our Lord and abundant in power. His understanding is beyond measure." Basically saying that God is incomprehensible. There's a lot of things that we can't ultimately know about God. Anselm believes in God, so he seems to have a predisposition answering the question if God exists from the perspective believing that he does exist. Anselm implies our own understanding of God determines how realistic his existence can be to us on an individual level. I think, personally, I think when we understand the character of God, it's easier to believe, whereas if you don't maybe understand God very well, or you have a immature idea of the character of God, it's harder to open up to that belief, or it's harder to understand, especially in today's age, people that maybe don't know that much about God, but have that predisposition in the other way, saying that um, that they don't understand a lot about God, but that they don't really care to believe. But I think that when we study more about God, that and his characters revealed, that it is easier to believe and to understand. Aquinas is a little different. He gives 5 ways to prove that God exists. Those 5 ways are motion, meaning there must have been a first motion. A lot of these are just saying that there must have been a source for all of these things. The second way is effective cause, that there must have been a first cause to everything. Possibility and necessity is the third thing, that there must be a source from these things to exist from. The fourth thing is grades of perfection, saying that all things in reality are on a scale of perfection, and that if there is this scale, or things can be on a degree of perfection, so there must be something that is ultimately and completely perfect. And the fifth thing is design. Things act in the sake for an end. One example is bees acting to make honey, but these things without intelligence must be designed to accomplish an end. He also says that human beings have a natural knowledge of God. It just might be unclear to some without further understanding of who God is. This brings to mind Romans 1, verse 19. Since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has been made plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. We know God from experience in nature. He also gives this idea of invisible cause and visible effect, much like seeing the smoke of a fire but not being able to see the fire that it comes from. So I think this leads into one of my questions, which is, do we have to have a visible cause to believe in God, or are we eliminating faith when we think in this way? My last question is, how did people feel about Anselm's argument at the time, with him having a belief in God before making his argument? Uh, Most might think that he's just biased and coming to the conclusion he wants to come to. I think people are quick to discredit us today if they assume that we are biased in our arguments in the same way. So, thank you.